President, and I want to welcome all the returning and new members of the committee organizational Congress. Adopt 16th Congress, appoint subcommittee chairs and ranking members, as well as approve the assignment of members to subcommittees. The House Committee on, and during my tenure on this committee, I've witnessed how effective, experienced both wins and losses on this committee. During this Congress, as chairman, I hope to encourage more wins that advance the issues important to our veterans. And I hope to use the gavel in a manner that exhibits the growth that followed previous losses. The membership of this committee is now better reflects the increasingly diverse veterans population. More women than ever are serving in the U.S. military. And for the first time in this committee's history, a majority of women veteran with military committee. She will also be the first woman veteran in disability assistance and memorial affairs. Those who served will chair the subcommittee on technology modernization. It's because of this, I'm moving this thing up there as well. Okay. Returning Congresswoman Brownlee will continue her work to advance the unique needs of women veterans as chair of the Subcommittee on Health and our newly created task force on women veterans. Congressman Levin is the grandson of a World War II veteran. He will chair the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity. And last but not least, Congressman Pappas, an experienced legislator, will chair our soon-to-be increasingly busy Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations. I'm pleased to welcome returning members, Congressman Lamb, a Marine veteran and talented prosecutor, Congressman Sablon, an Army Reserve veteran and passionate advocate, and a seasoned congressman, but the new member to this committee, Congressman Peterson, also a veteran and skilled lawmaker, serving as chair of the Committee on Agriculture and a founding member of the Blue Dog Coalition. Additionally, Congresswoman Rice will continue to bring her passion and advocacy for some of our most vulnerable veterans, those ejected through deportation from the country they selflessly served. I must also highlight the service of freshman members, Congressman Max Rose, a Bronze Star and Purple Heart recipient, served our nation in the Army, and Congressman Cisneros, a Navy veteran with over a decade of service. Also joining us this Congress are Congresswoman Underwood, an experienced expert in the development of healthcare policy, Congressman Brindisi, a state lawmaker and attorney, Congressman Allred, an accomplished academic and talented athlete who could not be with us today because he is on paternity leave for the birth of his first child, and Congressman Cunningham, an attorney and energetic advocate for South Carolina's veterans. Looking around, it cannot be denied that this is a new committee filled with freshman members. I ask that our returning members, regardless of party, surround and support these new members as they work to represent the best interests of their veterans, and we as a committee work to advance the interests of veterans nationwide. And although many of our members may be new to Congress, they are experienced in advocacy, legislating, and incredibly passionate about the causes that are important to them. This is by far the most diverse group of members ever to serve on this committee, and I know our veterans will benefit as a result, because each and every one of you will be instrumental in helping us accomplish our work this Congress, regardless of party, military experience, or seniority. and we cannot deny that the challenges facing VA are many. Those of us who are returning to this committee are acutely aware of this, and I believe it is the driving force behind our desire to continue to serve. We all want to see VA succeed. However, in order to advance success, we must work together with VA to fully understand the needs of the agency, barriers to progress, and the pathway to VA 2030. Now, VA 2030 is something that you may have heard me talk about. It is a simple vision to help us look forward at what we as legislators envision as the ideal VA. I look forward to working with each of you to flesh out areas that can be improved, including long-term care, vocational rehabilitation, claims processing, and transition assistance. VA 2030 is a goal that we can strive to meet and we can help VA to achieve. By envisioning VA in the year 2030, I hope to reduce the amount of short-term fixes that we labor over and instead invest that labor into modern, long-term solutions that will make VA more reliable and nimble for this generation and the next generation of veterans. An agency that not only veterans look to for high-quality health care, but that the private sector attempts to emulate at every turn. A system that surrounds veterans and their families with support from the moment they separate until long after the veteran passes away. But to pursue VA 2030, this committee has a lot of work to do over the next year. VHA must complete the actions necessary to remove itself from GAO's high-risk list, something they have failed to do since being placed on GAO's list in 2015. This committee must demand permanent, experienced, and accountable leadership at every level of the organization, but most importantly, at the upper levels of VA's central office. This committee and the Committee on Appropriations will need to answer a question that both lawmakers and VSOs could not answer last Congress. How do we fund community care networks, caregiver expansion, and modernization of VA's aging infrastructure in the most responsible manner? These are difficult issues to tackle. They aren't always trendy, and they don't always fit neatly within the confines of a press release or even opening statements. But they are important, and they are necessary, and I plan to engage each and every one of you in finding viable solutions. During my tenure as chairman, I hope to work with the department and both of my colleagues across the aisle and in the other chamber, and you all know what chamber I'm talking about, to safeguard veterans' access to high-quality, timely care and benefits, and the benefits they deserve. And I'm confident that together we can leverage the experiences each of you have in this room to develop multifaceted, bipartisan solutions to cure some of VA's most pressing problems. Now, I want to thank you to each of you for allowing me to serve as your chairman, and I hope my leadership highlights the passion each of you have for our nation's veterans. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me, my staff, regardless of party, should you have any concerns or should you need additional support pursuing your legislative endeavors. And I mean that to each of you, both on the majority and the minority side of the panel. I now recognize the ranking member, Dr. Rowe, to make an opening statement and to introduce the minority members.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations, Chairman Takano, on your selection to be the chairman of this committee for the 116th Congress. And I know this is not going to be a long meeting because Ranking Member Walls on the longer meetings used to bring 2 20-ounce Mountain Dews, and that's not here, so I know this won't take too long. I do not have to tell you the important role the chairman of the House Veterans Affairs Committee plays as a voice for veterans and their families who have served this country. When you look at what we accomplished together last Congress, it's really rather amazing. We passed about 80 bills in the past 2 years. Almost 50 of them were signed into law. One was a huge bill, the Accountability and Whistleblower Protection, the Forever GI Bill, Appeals Modernization, and the VA Mission Act. And I was glad to have your support on each of these pieces of important legislation. We can hold our heads high and be proud of our bipartisan work. To our returning members, congratulations and thank you for your continued work on these important issues. Your institutional knowledge will be extremely helpful in bolstering constructive debate regarding VA policy. And to our new members, thank you for giving this committee your time and energy. And I'm excited to have such a strong representation of America's newest generation of veterans serving on the committee. VA, like so many institutions, is transforming. Changes in medicine and technology, along with a shifting veteran demographic, demand that we evaluate how VA does business to ensure it is serving veterans in a way that best suits their expectations. I believe your experience will be invaluable as we discuss what VA should look like in the years to come, and I applaud the chairman for his 2030 vision. Looking forward, one primary focus during the 116th Congress will be overseeing the proper implementation of the laws enacted last Congress. Governor Tim Walz, I just mentioned, the former ranking member of the committee, was fond of reminding everyone of a New York Times article from July of 2017 titled, "A Bipartisan Congress That Works?" ? The Veterans Committee shows how it's done. And it's true, we have led the way in an otherwise divided Congress. I hope that we will retain the spirit and practice of bipartisanship that's the hallmark of this committee. And with your leadership, Mr. Chairman, I believe we will, and you can and will. And I want to just finish by saying that I've been in this Congress for 10 years. This is my 6th term. And I think at the end of the day, when you finish, I think all of us can ask ourselves, have we made a difference? Did it make a difference that I was in the U.S. Congress? I think serving on this committee, you can hold your head high and say, I have made a difference. I have affected the lives, because I can tell each of you, when you go back to your districts, to our districts, when we go back, probably one of the most important things we will work on are veterans issues. Each one of you are probably already doing that in the first month that you've been in the Congress. You can make a difference in the life of a veteran who served this country honorably, and I think it's a noble cause that we have, and that's the reason I believe this is such a bipartisan committee. I welcome each and every one of you, all the members back. That, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Rowe, and I think we've already found some common ground on the subject of avoiding caffeine. So you won't see big bottles of Mountain Dew, with all due respect to the former ranking member, Mr. Walz. Pursuant to Clause 2A of House Rule 11, the first order of business is the adoption of the committee's rules of procedure for the 116th Congress. A copy of the proposed rules has been distributed to each of you in advance. This proposed rules package is designed to maximize and preserve the bipartisan way in which we've always conducted business, while also complying with the rules of the House, particularly Rule 11, which governs the procedures of committees. The changes to the rules from the 115th Congress reflect the way in which I intend to lead this committee. The committee will not depart from the House rules. It will provide fair and efficient processes for all members to be heard, and it will notify witnesses of their rights and afford them those rights when they testify before us. For these reasons, the rules have also been revised for clarity and ease of reference. These rules mostly differ from those in force in the 115th Congress in 3 respects. First, the provisions requiring members to obtain a Congressional Budget Office score and file their amendments 24 hours in advance of a markup to be made in order have been struck. These provisions directly violated the House Rules of Procedure and prevented members from being able to offer their legislative ideas during markups. No provision in our committee rules will prevent any of you, regardless of party, from being able to offer germane amendments during markups, because those amendments reflect your ideas. Although at times we may passionately disagree, this committee will have a fair and open process for robust debate of those ideas, because we are all elected here to serve the veterans and the people of our districts, and we are all here to do what is best in the interest of veterans. The provisions in the 116th rules package governing meeting and markup procedures preserve the bipartisan and efficient way in which we conduct business. The markups and meetings will be noticed 3 days in advance, exclusive of weekends and holidays. The text of legislation to be considered will be posted 48 hours in advance, and amendments filed 24 hours in advance will be prioritized for consideration, so each of us have some notice of the legislation and amendments we will consider. Second, the rules contain new provisions under Rule 3 that provide notice to witnesses of their rights and limit the amount of time for witnesses to be questioned by members and staff to prevent abuse of witnesses and to give each member on this committee an equal opportunity to question witnesses under the 5-minute rule. This will ensure a fair process for members to be heard and for the witnesses who appear before our committee. This is the process described by the House rules. Third, there are minor changes to the jurisdiction of the committee, and here they are. The Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity will now have jurisdiction over homeless veterans' housing, and the Subcommittee on Health will have jurisdiction over health care provided to homeless veterans. Working to end veterans' homelessness is both an economic and health care issue, and we need both subcommittees working together on this top priority of mine. The EO Subcommittee will now be responsible for veteran-owned business concerns, unless it involves government contracting, which will continue to fall under the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations. The O&I Subcommittee will be responsible for most matters related to VA administration, including the laws and policies governing VA employees, the protection of whistleblowers, and employees' due process rights. However, depending on the specific issue, it could also be referred to other subcommittees. The Subcommittee on Health will be responsible for community care, even though aspects of community care involve government contracting. For this committee to successfully address the issues of importance to veterans across the country, the subcommittees and each of you will need to work together and coordinate on many issues that cross subcommittee jurisdictions so that we can develop sound policy and oversee VA's execution of the laws we pass. Now, I now yield to Ranking Member Dr. Rowe for any remarks that he may have about the rules package.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple reservations about the proposed rules changes. For example, the proposed rules discard the past practice of having a CBO cost estimate on legislation, even an informal one. Before we mark up a bill so members can appreciate the potential cost of legislation they will need to vote on. Similarly, the proposed rules no longer require the chair to provide 48-hour notice on an amendment in the nature of a substitute that will be used by the chairman as base text. With that, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
So I was going to ask if there are any amendments to the committee rules, and you have an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 1, offered by Mr. Rowe of Tennessee, on page 2, line 32, insert paragraph G, Congressional Budget Office scoring. The committee shall not include any bill or resolution for consideration during a committee markup which is not accompanied by an accounting from the Congressional Budget Office of the mandatory and discretionary cost savings associated with such bill or resolution. The accounting from the Congressional Budget Office need not be official, but is expected to provide committee members with an approximation of the budgetary impact a bill or resolution may have prior to any vote to favorably forward or report such bill or resolution. The requirements of this page may be waived by a majority of committee members, a quorum being present.
I now recognize, Dr. Rowe, you're recognized for 5 minutes in support of your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since at least the 112th Congress, this committee has included a rule that required a CBO score, even if it was an informal score, before the committee would consider a bill as marked up. This rule, however, could be waived. The rule served as an important function in that it informed members of a bill's cost before it was sent to the House for consideration. Given that the House rules maintain adherence to PAYGO, and given that all of us are cognizant of our authorizing committee's impact and pressure on available discretionary spending, especially with tight discretionary budget caps for at least the next 2 years, it makes sense for us to have at least some idea of what a bill costs before we cast a vote on it. Without it, we're simply flying blind. Again, the rule for an formal or informal CBO scores could be waived if unforeseen circumstances prevent us from getting one. I hope my colleagues will join me in support of my amendment. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes in opposition, although I do not oppose the amendment. Since it is routine committee practice to obtain unofficial cost analyses from CBO before noticing legislation for markup, I support the ranking member's amendment. Is there any further discussion or debate on the amendment? Seeing none, I will now move to the question. The question before us is on the amendment by the gentleman from Tennessee. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr.
Go ahead.
Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment number 2, offered by Mr. Rowe of Tennessee. On page 2, line 15, insert including any amendment in the nature of a substitute to such bills or resolutions that shall first be recognized by the chair after legislation. On page 2, line 21, insert notice under paragraph B after matter.
Dr. Rowe is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment is simple. It clarifies that amendment in the nature of a substitute, or ANS, which will be treated as base text by the chairman at a markup, must be noticed 48 hours in advance of a markup. This is a common sense rule and permits members to read a measure before it's considered and to draft amendments to it. The House changed its rules in the 112th Congress to add clause 2G4 of House Rule 11, which the rule is retained for the 116th Congress. Former Rules Committee Chairman David Dreyer, California, explained the reason for and interpretation of this change in comments published in the Congressional Record. He said, and I quote, "If the chair of a committee intends to use an amendment in the nature of a substitute as the base text for purposes of further amendment, circulation of that text will satisfy the notice requirement. This notice rule is not inconsistent with House rules. Rather, it complies with the intent of the House rule that members be given at least 24 hours to consider text of bills to be considered. Experts at the Congressional Research Service agree that providing advance notice of an ANS that the chairman wishes to be considered at markup text is customary. More importantly, it has worked for our committee for 8 years. If the chairman wishes to combine measures into a substitute amendment, then all members may see what the substitute looks like in advance of a markup and draft any proposed changes to it. I believe this is transparent and fair for all members. I ask my colleagues for their support of this clarifying amendment. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes in opposition, although I'm not opposed to the amendment. This amendment specifies that if an amendment in the nature of a substitute is the legislation that will be considered as original text for the purposes of amendment during a markup, the ANS must be noticed 48 hours in advance. This is routine committee practice, so I support this amendment. Is there any further debate on the amendment? Seeing none, we will now consider the question before us. The question is on the amendment by the gentleman from Tennessee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. And the amendment is agreed to.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk, the clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 3, offered by Mr. Rowe of Tennessee. On page 1, line 5, insert Rule 1, General Provisions. On page 9, line 21, strike D before availability and insert E. On page 2, line 16, 1, after paragraph and insert A.
The gentleman from Tennessee has 5 minutes to speak in favor of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The changes proposed in this amendment are purely technical. I do understand correctly that you are in agreement with these corrections and that you will ask unanimous consent for staff to make technical and conforming corrections. And with that, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back. I recognize myself for 5 minutes to speak in opposition to the amendment. Although I do not oppose these amendments, you are correct. The majority is in agreement with these technical and conforming changes.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I withdraw my amendment and I yield back.
Is there any further debate on the amendment? Seeing none, oh, you withdrew the amendment. Oh, that's right, okay. Seeing that you withdrew the amendment, we'll move forward. I will now, are there any further amendments to the committee rules? Any further amendments to the committee rules? If not, I recognize Ranking Member Rowe for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, before we vote on final passage of the rules, which I will support, may I ask you for an explanation on a couple of other proposed changes to the rules package. First, one of the major laws enacted last Congress was the Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act. It established a new office within VA and is clearly a major area of oversight for the committee. That said, jurisdiction over employment, accountability, and civil service matters was removed from the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee and not placed anywhere else. Can you tell me where you envision such matters being considered at the subcommittee level?
The jurisdiction for the matter you just raised will be given to the O&I subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last question. Proposed Rule 2D encourages members to submit amendments 24 hours in advance of a markup. The proposed rule says you have a discretion to prioritize amendments. Is it your expectation that amendments filed 24 hours in advance will be given your priority for consideration? I think you said that you were. And I think this will really encourage transparency among members to get the amendments in on time so that no one is surprised at a markup itself. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
I will confirm that it is the intention of the majority to prioritize amendments in the manner you alluded to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With your clarification, I move that we agree to the resolution to adopt the proposed committee rules for the 116th Congress as amended.
The question before us is the rules package. All those in favor of adopting the rules, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and with the proposed rules as amended are adopted. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to the House rules, the rules adopted by the House Committee on Veterans Affairs in the 116th Congress will be published in the Congressional Record and made available to members and the public on the committee's website. Now we will approve our subcommittee chairs and ranking members. Before you lay rosters of full committee members as well as each subcommittee listing chairs and ranking members. First, I'd like to say a few words about Representative Connor Lamb from Pennsylvania, the vice chair of the full committee, who was elected by a unanimous vote of the Democratic Committee Caucus. Mr. Lamb is as a veteran, a former U.S. Marine Corps Judge Advocate General and Assistant U.S. Attorney with experience prosecuting military sexual assault cases and combating the opioid epidemic by prosecuting those responsible for opioid-related deaths. This committee will greatly benefit from his expertise, leadership, and demonstrated willingness to serve his country. Now we will approve our subcommittee chairs. Ms. Luria has been elected to serve as the chair of the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs. Mr. Levin has been elected to serve as the chair of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity. Ms. Brownlee has been elected to serve as the chair of the Subcommittee on Health. Mr. Pappas has been elected to serve as the chair of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations, and Ms. Lee has been elected to serve as the chair of the Subcommittee on Technology Modernization. Vice Chairman Lamb, you are recognized for a motion establishing the subcommittee chairs.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the list of subcommittee chairs as set forth in the resolution be approved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the chairs and vice chair are appointed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Now we will approve our subcommittee ranking members. Ms. Radewagen will serve as the vice ranking member. Mr. Boast will serve as the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs. Mr. Bilirakis will serve as the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity. Dr. Dunn will serve as the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Health. General Bergman will serve as the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations. And Mr. Banks will serve as the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Technology Modernization. Vice Ranking Radewagen, you are now recognized for a motion offered by Dr. Rowe establishing the subcommittee ranking members. Of course, yeah. Dr. Rowe, you're recognized.
I thank the chairman, and I can see that that Chairman Peterson's on the edge of his seat to this exciting Rules Committee. Welcome. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to announce that we have 4 of our 5 Republican subcommittee leaders returning this year. Dr. Neil Dunn, Lieutenant General Bergman, Representative Bost, and Representative Banks, all of whom are veterans. I'm also pleased to welcome Representative Gus Bilirakis as the newest ranking member of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity, and as you know, Gus is a zealous advocate for our veterans. I'm pleased to announce that Delegate Radewagen will serve as my vice-ranking member. Delegate Radewagen has served this committee faithfully and makes veterans a top priority. I'm also pleased to have Ms. Radewagen as our new vice-ranking member. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Rowe. Thank you, Dr. Rowe. Vice-ranking member Radewagen, you are now recognized for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt the resolution designating the Republican vice-ranking member and Republican subcommittee ranking members.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and the subcommittee ranking members are appointed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Now we'll approve subcommittee assignments. A copy of the subcommittee rosters is before you. Ranking Member Rowe and I have agreed on the following subcommittee ratios. On the Health Subcommittee, there'll be 7 majority members and 5 minority members. Economic Opportunity Subcommittee, 7 majority members and 5 minority members. Oversight and Investigations Subcommittee, there'll be 5 majority members and 4 minority members. Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs Subcommittee, 5 majority members and 4 minority members. Technology Modernization Subcommittee, 4 majority members and 3 minority members. I am pleased to say that we've actually increased the size of our total committee, and because of the tremendous workload that we have and the 5 subcommittees that we have designated, Dr. Rowe, I applaud you for creating the Subcommittee on Technology Modernization. It was, I think, sorely needed. And with that, I will ask Vice Chairman Lamb, I will recognize him to present a motion establishing the subcommittee assignments for the majority.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the majority subcommittee assignments as set forth in the resolution be approved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the majority subcommittee rosters are approved, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Vice-Ranking Member Radewagen for the resolution offered by Dr. Rowe establishing subcommittee assignments for the minority.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt the resolution designating the Republican members of the subcommittees.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the minority subcommittee rosters are approved, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The last item on our agenda is the approval of the committee staff. A list of the staff is before you. Ranking Member Rowe, you are recognized for a motion to adopt the resolution approving the committee staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are fortunate to have such a dedicated staff, and I'm pleased to see so many of them returning. With that, I move that we adopt the resolution designating committee staff as written.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the resolution is agreed to. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The committee oversight plan will be provided to each of you within the next few days. Per House rules, the oversight plan must be provided to each member for a minimum of 7 days and filed with the committees on oversight and reform and administration before March 1st. This will afford each member the opportunity to comment and propose changes to the plan and file additional supplemental or minority views if you so choose. I also ask each of you to remain for a few minutes for a committee photo. This can, and after the, before the committee photo, I will say that this will conclude the order of business for today's business meeting, and I truly look forward to working with each and every one of you. So please stay for the photo. Without objection, committee staff are authorized to make technical and conforming changes to reflect the action of the committee in adopting the resolutions embodying our rules of procedure. Does the ranking member or any other member seek recognition for debate before we're concluding? Dr. Rowe, you're recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, look, I look forward to working with you and all the members on the veteran staff. We have a solemn obligation on this committee to do right by 21 million men and women who've served this country honorably. And it is a true privilege. It is a privilege to be on this committee. And I can tell you at the end of the day, as I said in my previous remarks, you can go back home and know you actually made a difference. Sometimes you're up here and with all the partisan squabbling that goes on, we wonder why we even got elected or are we making a difference. You can make a difference on this committee, and you will make a difference on this committee if you put your heart, mind, and soul to it. And Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you, and I know we get a lot of great things to do this Congress. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Let me just say I associate myself with the remarks of the ranking member. I look forward to working with him and each and every member of this committee to make a difference for our nation's veterans and to make a difference for our country. And with that, without objection, the committee stands adjourned. The committee stands. I'm going to do it. The committee stands adjourned, but stay for the photo.